A clear autumn day in Gauteng with round 7 and 8 of the Bankfin Touring Car Championship, bringing race fans flocking to the Gestetner Showdown National Championship meeting at the AA Kyalami Grand Prix circuit in Midrand. The Bankfin Grid Girls, drivers' parades and autograph sessions where enthusiasts can get to meet their heroes are all part and parcel of the Bankfin Touring Car Series. It all adds up to a colourful scene at circuits around South Africa, but behind the glitz and the glamour, teams and drivers have a job of work to do, and there are prestige championships to be won and lost. After 6 rounds, reigning champion Janelle de Villiers was well clear of BP Nissan teammate Duncan Voss, with Audi pair Terry Moss and Chris Aberdeen and privateer Marco dos Santos completing the top 5 in the Drivers' Championship. The qualifying session for round 7 and some interesting developments among the privateer ranks. Garth Waberski was giving the new DAW WAP Toyota Camry its first outing, with the team running into a few teething problems. British driver Mark Peters has been Mr. Consistent this season in the immaculately turned out Duxbury Modem's BMW, and AA Kyalami saw the return of touring car prodigal son Anthony Taylor. A former Toyota Works driver, Taylor was out in the ex-Aberdeen Audi, prepared by father Roger. Quickest of the privateers was once again Marco dos Santos in the Midas Duckens Nissan Sentra.
You know, we went half second quicker than we've ever been here. Really happy. We thought we were going to get quite a bit of a challenge from Anthony. He's been quick the whole weekend, but we pulled it out the bag again. Us and my team did an excellent job last night to sort out the cars, having a bit of problems yesterday. But Nick and Rob and Duncan, they really did a great job and sorted out the car for qualifying.
As his 5th place in the Drivers' Championship would suggest, Marcos dos Santos has been a right royal pain in the neck for the factory teams this season and ended up 4th on the grid for round 7. 3rd fastest time went to Duncan Voss in the factory BP Nissan Primera, who was only around 0.02 of a second quicker than the young privateer. Voss is a former South African Drivers' Champion and has played an important role in the emergence of the BP Nissan team as the dominant force in South African touring car racing over the last season and a half. Most Bankfin touring car pundits would have put money on Voss and teammate Janelle de Villiers showing the front row of the grid. Any thoughts along those lines were shattered by the 1994 champion Sean van der Linde in the Works Sassel BMW. Van der Linde has a liking for AA Kyalami and always goes well at the African continent's only Grand Prix circuit. A determined van der Linde was 0.02 of a second faster than Voss and grabbed a share of the front row of the grid alongside reigning champion and current championship leader Janelle de Villiers in the 2nd BP Nissan Primera. De Villiers was the only driver to go under 1 minute 52 second barrier and was nearly half a second faster than van der Linde. The grid for round 7 of the Bankfin Touring Car Series with Nissan and BMW on the front row. It was factory Nissan and privateer Nissan on row 2. Row 3 Briggs BMW and Aberdeen Audi. And row 4 privateer Taylor in the Audi and Moss in the factory car.
Janelle de Villiers and Sean van der Linde led the cars onto the Gestetner straight at the end of the parade lap. And almost immediately, race cam action from the Voss Nissan as they stream into the Penzol curves. First corner dramatics have been a feature of the Bankfin series, and guess what? The malady struck again with contact between Aberdeen and Briggs. The unfortunate Aberdeen disappeared in a cloud of dust with the Audi well and truly stuck in the kitty litter. And you can be sure that he will not be going anywhere in a hurry. Back to race cam action with Briggs following Terry Moss through Nashua corner. And back at the Penzol curves, a pair of rather pretty young Kyalami marshals were helping the somewhat peeved Chris Aberdeen out of the engine Audi. The lead is streaming through Goodyear curve with the BP Nissan Primeras of de Villiers and Voss leading the van der Linde Sassel Beamer and the Santos and the Midas Nissan Sentra. Then came Moss, Taylor, Briggs, Cowie and a flock of privateers as we take a look at replay action of the first corner incident that put Chris Aberdeen out of the race. That was put down to a racing accident, and you're allowed to agree or disagree depending on whether you come from the BMW camp or the Audi camp. No arguments here though as de Villiers and Voss pull away from dos Santos down the Caltex mineshaft through the Haviland sweep and into the hairpin at the Vodacom Bowl. Van der Linde was 4th, Moss 5th in the factory engine Audi and under a little pressure from Anthony Taylor in the ex-Aberdeen car. A little wave there from Moss as if to say thanks for not punting me up the backside at the hairpin. Through the AA kink and down the short straight to Gestetner corner, the 2 BP Nissan Primeros were again confirming the fact that for the last season and a half, they have been the cars to beat. Marco dos Santos was again right up there with the front-running Works teams and doing a great job of holding off Sean van der Linde. Race cam action now from the Briggs car, and he has not won a race since he joined the Sasol BMW team at the start of the 1997 season. Briggs found himself behind Moss and Taylor, who was a little out of shape at the second of the Penzol curves. And with the Audi fishtailing around, Briggs grabbed the opportunity to sneak through into sixth, with the Sasol BMW now sandwiched between the two Audis. Hard on the brakes and through. Race order was now De Villiers, Vos, De Santos, van der Linde, Moss and Briggs, with Anthony Taylor via his big moment at the Penzol curves also losing out to Hilton Cowie in the Minolta Toyota Corolla. Moss and Briggs were now coming under pressure from Cowie, who was in the middle of a dreadful patch. The victim of a lot of cruel luck this season, Cowie's best result was a second place in Port Elizabeth early in the Bankfin series, and he was desperately looking for a good result at AA Kyalami. The Minolta Toyota was right up there with Moss and Briggs, and matters were looking up for the Cape Town driver. Finally. A real bird's eye view, and through the second of the Winfield S's and up the Winfield Hill, Cowie was right on Briggs's back bumper, and behind the first four cars, a terrific battle was brewing between Moss, Briggs, Cowie and Taylor. The four cars were closely bunched, but coming out of Westbank corner, Taylor pulled alongside Cowie and then found a sudden burst of speed to draw clear of the Minolta Toyota. The Toyota squad were hoping to run their new car at AA Kyalami, but delays in the delivery of new engines and gearboxes from the UK saw Cowie out in the old car. Cowie is a talented and experienced young driver, and at the Vodacom Bowl he managed to get underneath Taylor and had the inside line for the run up the hill to the AA kink. Amongst the drivers, the right and immediately left kink is not the most popular section of the circuit at AA Kyalami, and Cowie was all over the curves, but he was still ahead of Taylor, and that was the important factor for the Toyota man, who was looking for his first points haul in 4 races. Down the main straight with Janelle De Villiers and Duncan Vos looking to be in complete control, thank you very much. Marco De Santos was still third, but had Sean van der Linde breathing down his neck. Then came the second wave of cars, led by Terry Moss, who was being shadowed by Mike Briggs, Hilton Cowie and Anthony Taylor. Race cam action is from the Briggs Sasol Beamer, with all the two-time champions' 27 touring car victories coming while he was a member of the Opel factory team. While Briggs was trying to pressurize Moss into a mistake, there were problems for privateer George Besaidnout, and a visit to the pits left him way down the pecking order. Half distance in race 1 and a dramatic change behind race leader De Villiers, Vos, De Santos and van der Linde. Privateer Anthony Taylor in the ex-Aberdeen Audi had found his second breath and had moved ahead of both the Mike Briggs Sasol BMW and Terry Moss in the works Engine Audi. Taylor was now fifth, and Briggs had a bird's eye view of the battle ahead of him and between the two Audis. Taylor and Moss had 3 or 4 car lengths on Briggs, who stood at Hilton Cowie on his tailpipe, with the drivers now entering a critical stage of the race, where tyre wear would start to play a role. The Cowie Minolta Toyota was carrying the scars of battle, with the Cape Town driver enjoying his best outing since his second place in round 3 of the Bankfin series. Cowie was matching the 2 Audis and the BMW for pace, but the main focus in this 4-car struggle was on young Taylor, who was having his first touring car outing in more than a year. The mere fact that Taylor was running ahead of 1996 champion Moss and the factory engine Audi was enough to make touring car enthusiasts sit up and take notice. Bumpers are flying, and down the Caltex mineshaft, Taylor was starting to edge away from Moss, with the young Krugersdorp driver producing more evidence of an exceptional talent. More to the point, Taylor was also starting to make inroads into the gap between himself and the tight scrap going on for 3rd and 4th between Sean van der Linde and Marco De Santos. Vos using the curb hopping method absolutely perfectly, and race leader Janelle De Villiers and Vos were in control of proceedings, but behind them van der Linde finally got past De Santos at Gestetner corner. There must have been a sigh of relief from the BMW pit right then. But there were danger signs that any signs of relief from the BMW camp might have been a little premature. Marco De Santos was fighting back, and through the Penzol curves there was just a hint of contact between the Sasol BMW and the Midas Stuckham's Nissan, and at the entrance to National Corner, van der Linde firmly closed the door on De Santos. Race leaders Janelle De Villiers and Duncan Vos were long gone in the BP Nissan Primeras, but matters were hotting up between van der Linde and De Santos, who also had other things to worry about. Creeping up on the pair was a fired-up Anthony Taylor, who was still edging away from Terry Moss, Mike Briggs and Hilton Cowie. Lap 9, with a BP Nissan Primera pair of Janelle De Villiers and Duncan Vos now well clear of van der Linde, De Santos and their company. The 2 Nissans were running in tandem, with De Villiers on the verge of another career milestone. Prior to this race, Mike Briggs with 27 wins and Sean van der Linde with 16 victories were South Africa's most successful touring car drivers. A win here would draw de Villiers level with van der Linde, and with team orders probably dictating that Vos stay where he was, matters were looking good for de Villiers, who took one record away from Briggs when he scored 12 wins just last season. While the BP Nissan pair looked to be strolling towards another 1-2 triumph, there was high drama behind them. Anthony Taylor was now right up with Sean van der Linde, with race cam action from the Taylor Audi as he pulled alongside van der Linde down the main straight and into the Penzol curves. Taylor had the inside line through the first of the Penzol curves and then produced a stunning piece of driving to slip through on the inside of van der Linde at the second Penzol curve. Great driving. It was a marvellous display of virtuosity, but while Taylor was now up into third, there were problems for Marco dos Santos, who was in the pits with technicians peering under the Midas Duckham's Nissan Sentra. Luck for the youngster, but no change up front, and the view from the Gestetner corner back to the AA Kink amply illustrated the gap between the two BP Nissan Primeras and Anthony Taylor in the Audi and Sean van der Linde in the Sassel Beamer. Van der Linde was grimly hanging on, but Taylor looked to have his measure. It might not have been the sort of scenario the factory engine Audi team had anticipated, but you had to give young Taylor credit for a stunning performance, with Father Roger also again demonstrating his genius when it comes to preparing race cars. Taylor and van der Linde had opened up a sizable gap over Mike Briggs in the second Sassel BMW, with Terry Moss and the Works Audi now running in sixth, ahead of Hilton Cowie in the Minolta Toyota Corolla. In earlier rounds of the Bankfin series this season, Cowie had the misfortune to be in the wrong place at the wrong time when accidents were about to happen, with a string of non-finishes a source of frustration for the whole Toyota squad. Those engines still sounding great, and looking at the tyre wear, there's just a little action of what's still to come later. One of a string of young drivers who came to the fore in South Africa around 10 years ago, Cowie was part of a brat pack that included Mike Briggs and Chris Aberdeen. He looked to be closing in on Moss when the racing gods once again frowned on the Toyota team. The throttle on the Minolta Corolla stuck wide open at the entrance to the Goodyear sweep, with the car sliding off the circuit spectacularly. And that was Cowie's race ending in another cloud of dust. The final lap with the BP Nissan Primera duo of Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Vos simply putting the finishing touches to proceedings. There weren't going to be any last-ditch heroics from Duncan Vos, who'd been tucked in behind his teammate for 4 or 5 laps. There were also going to be no last-lap heroics from Sean van der Linde, who'd settled for 4th. There was no way van der Linde was going to catch Anthony Taylor, and with a sizable gap over teammate Mike Briggs, there was no reason for van der Linde to take any late race risks. While Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Vos motored serenely through the Goodyear sweep and Goodyear corner complex, marshals were throwing the Hilton Cowie Minolta Toyota out of the gravel trap. It was also a lonely last lap for British driver Mark Peters in the Duxbury Modems BMW. The consistent Peters was down in 7th and second behind Taylor amongst the privateers. Way up ahead, de Villiers and Vos were negotiating the final 2 corners, with AA Kyalami starter John Wheeler waiting with a checkered flag for the 2 BP Nissan Primeras. De Villiers and Vos crossed the line with no other car in sight for another comprehensive Nissan 1-2.
Win number 4 this season for Janelle de Villiers, but the story of the race, a wonderful performance from Anthony Taylor in the X-Works Audi. 5 privateers made it into the top 10, with de Villiers stretching his lead in the Drivers' Championship over teammate Duncan Vos, with the Nissans seemingly untouchable.
But it was a good race for us. The car's balance was good right from the start. We made a good start and I got a break, and from there on I just had to keep the gap there, so which we done pretty well. In the end, our tyres went off a bit, but I'm very happy with the result. With Duncan coming second as well, he drove very well to get past Sean there. So I'm happy with the result.
And up on the podium with the BP Nissan pair, a delighted Anthony Taylor.
To come back with such a good finish, I had a bit of a brake trouble in the beginning of the race. The pedal faded away on me a little bit, but it wasn't too much of a problem. I just had to end up braking a bit early. But the tyre, I think that might have also helped the tyres last a bit longer than the other cars.
With the cars out on the parade lap, a quick look at the grid before Arnold Geertz takes over to describe the action. An all-BP Nissan front row of Janelle de Villiers and Duncan Vos. Row 2, Sean van der Linde and Anthony Taylor. Row 3, Chris Aberdeen and Marco dos Santos. Row 4, Briggs and Moss.
The green lights from Clark of the course, Steve Harding with the pack streaming towards the Penzol curves for the first time in round 8. Race scam action now from the start was from the Hilton Cowie Minolta Toyota, and this time around no first corner incidents, with all the drivers giving each other plenty of room. Now race scam from the fast Nissan Primera, and he had round 7 casualty Chris Aberdeen tucked in behind him in the factory engine Audi. Behind Aberdeen, privateer Marco De Santos made a good start and had picked up an early place from 6th on the grid. As they charged down the old AA Kyalami pit straight, Janelle de Villiers led from Sean van der Linde, with Duncan Vos and Aberdeen fighting over 3rd place. Vos had by far the better line going through the Goodyear sweep, and through Goodyear corner, race order was de Villiers ahead of van der Linde, Vos, Aberdeen, De Santos, Taylor and van der Linde, as well as Cowie and Moss in tow. So then a very closely bunched field in the early stages of the race, with Chris Aberdeen tucked in behind Duncan Vos through the Winfield S's and up the hill towards Westbank corner. Up onto the tabletop at the entrance to Westbank corner, and an early change in race order, with round 7 hero Anthony Taylor now ahead of Marco De Santos and up into 5th place behind the factory engine Audi driven by Chris Aberdeen. In car with Taylor now, and a great view of the Caltex mineshaft. The speed builds up to around 200 k's an hour. There's no backing off through the Haviland sweep, and then it's hard on the brakes for the Vodacom Bowl hairpin. This is a prime overtaking area at AA Kyalami, but Duncan Vos was a little optimistic, and contact with Sean van der Linde saw the Sassel BMW spin out. The charge up the hill towards the AA Kink looked to be a recipe for disaster, with Taylor, Aberdeen and Vos side by side. No problems for leader de Villiers through the Kink, and the rest of the pack somehow also managed to funnel through, with De Santos squeezed a little wide, but otherwise unscathed. Now, race scam action from the Briggs BMW at Gestetner corner, and this time 6 into 5 just won't go. There was heavy contact between Briggs, the Moss Audi, and Hilton Cowie in the Minolta Toyota Corolla. And it seems that once again the racing gods were pulling faces at Cowie's 1998 campaign. Into the Penzol curves with a still closely bunched pack chasing after Janelle de Villiers, but this race was about to be stopped. Cowie was stranded in the middle of the circuit with a Minolta Toyota hors de combat, and van der Linde was in exactly the same boat at the Vodacom Bowl. Replay action of the incident that put the unfortunate Cowie out of the race, and following a protest from the Toyota team, both Terry Moss and Mike Briggs were fined 1,000 rand by the stewards of the meeting. Once again, Cowie was in the wrong place at the wrong time, with some anxious moments too for a few backmarkers, and confirmation from the marshals that they wanted the red flag brought out. Lap 2 after the restart, with everyone back in action with the exception of Hilton Cowie, whose miserable run of luck has got beyond a joke for the Toyota team. The restart worked to Sean van der Linde's advantage, with a Sassel BMW driver allowed to start from his original grid position. Van der Linde quickly slotted into 2nd and was putting plenty of pressure on round 7 winner and championship leader Janelle de Villiers in the BP Nissan Primera. With van der Linde tucked in behind de Villiers, Aberdeen was 3rd and Vos 4th as they stormed through the Winfield S's and up the hill towards Westbank. The restart did not work for Anthony Taylor, and he now found himself in 7th place, with Marco De Santos and Mike Briggs, the 2 drivers, immediately ahead of him. Taylor was climbing all over the back of the Briggs BMW, as it looked to be only a matter of time before Taylor started another charge through the field. It's hard racing up front there, and the engines are asked to give absolutely everything. The run down the Caltex mineshaft, with Taylor tucked in behind Briggs and De Santos. Through the Haviland sweep, Taylor was still tucked in behind the Sassel BMW, and at the Vodacom Bowl, Briggs was forced into a defensive line for the hairpin. Taylor employed a much tighter line through the corner, and on the run up to the hill to the AA Kink, he had the inside berth, and there wasn't much Briggs could do about the situation. Another clever piece of driving took Taylor up into 4th place, with De Santos next on his target list. At the front of the field, Sean van der Linde was still putting pressure on race leader Janelle de Villiers, with Chris Aberdeen handily placed in 3rd. Aberdeen had a lead of 3 or 4 car lengths over Duncan Vos and was going very well. De Santos was starting to lose a little ground on Vos, with Anthony Taylor closing in on the Midas Duckham's Nissan. Race scam action from the Briggs Sassel BMW, with Anthony Taylor ahead of him through the Penzol curves and up the short hill to Nashua corner. Briggs was trying to fight back, and young Taylor was being made to work to stay ahead of the 2-time champ. While this little skirmish raged on, work was over for the day for privateer Daryl Werner, with marshals calling for a tow truck to drag Werner's Opel Astra out of some AA Kyalami kitty litter. Lap 4, with Anthony Taylor now closing in for the kill on young Marco De Santos. Underbraking for the Vodacom Bowl hairpin, De Santos tried to defend his line, but Taylor simply muscled his way past the Midas Duckham's Nissan with a little exchange of paint between the 2 cars. Up at the AA kink, matters took a turn for the worse for Sean van der Linde, and he got himself into a huge tangle, and a spin left him facing in completely the wrong direction. Aberdeen and Voss were quickly through, and van der Linde then had to wait for Taylor, De Santos, Moss and Briggs to go past before he could rejoin proceedings. The little Taylor, De Santos and Moss train was the tightest battle on the racetrack. From 8th on the grid, 1996 champion Moss was gradually working his way through the field, and after going past Mike Briggs, it tagged onto the back of the Taylor, De Santos scrap. Moss tried his damnedest to make some further progress by going past De Santos up the short hill to Nashua Corner. A determined De Santos managed to hold him off, but was now under extreme pressure from the factory engine Audi and the ever-aggressive Moss. The race order was now De Villiers ahead of Aberdeen, Voss, Taylor and Moss, and a little tension was also starting to build where Taylor was concerned. After his rush, flush and brush with De Santos, there were ominous puffs of smoke from the Audi where bodywork was rubbing on the right rear tyre. Lap 10 and drama was starting to unfold. Chris Aberdeen had closed right up on race leader Janelle De Villiers, and Anthony Taylor had done exactly the same where Duncan Voss was concerned. With 2 laps to go, both the BP Nissan Primeras were clearly in trouble, and although AA Kyalami is not a circuit that is particularly hard on rubber tyre wear, it was starting to take its toll for the men in the green cars. The 2 BP Nissans looked ready for the taking, with Taylor putting pressure on Duncan Voss, and Aberdeen now right in line for his second win of the season at AA Kyalami. Goodyear Corner is another of AA Kyalami's favourite overtaking spots, and Janelle De Villiers needed to have all his wits about him to hold off Chris Aberdeen. Duncan Voss was having exactly the same problems with Anthony Taylor, and the inevitable happened when Aberdeen went ahead of De Villiers at the Winfield S's. Behind Aberdeen and De Villiers, a stubborn Voss managed to hold off Taylor, but it now looked to be only a matter of time before the second Audi moved into 3rd place. It was simply a question of where Taylor would choose to make his move. Well, you knew it. The answer wasn't long in coming, with Taylor trying his luck around the outside of Voss at Westbank. The Nissan Primera simply had no grip, and Taylor had his nose out in front as they hit the Caltex mineshaft. Audi were now 1st and 3rd, and the only other question they needed answering was whether or not Taylor could catch De Villiers, with Sean van der Linde also making a late race effort to catch Mark Peters in the Duxbury Modems BMW. Great racing so far in the penultimate lap. Tension was building in the Audi cap, with Anthony Taylor now right up with Janelle De Villiers. It was another sparkling performance from Taylor, who had a lap and a bit to go to get past the BP Nissan Primera. He didn't need that long, and in what was almost a carbon copy of his earlier passing move on Voss, Taylor closed in on De Villiers at Westbank. Once again, the Audi was ahead of a Nissan down the Caltex mineshaft, and it was now all over bar the shouting. Or was it? Through the Haviland sweep, Taylor had the inside line, and with the Nissan Primera's tyres now shot, De Villiers was clearly a beaten man. Now Taylor was within striking distance of race leader Aberdeen, and that also opened up possibilities for more late drama. The final lap, and nobody at AA Kyalami had any doubt that Taylor would throw everything into a last-ditch effort to get past the factory-run Audi. That also added to a little extra pressure for Aberdeen, who is now under the whip. Also under the whip was Mark Peters, with the Duxbury Modems car now under attack from Sean van der Linde, and moved into 7th place at Nashua Corner. Ahead of van der Linde was teammate Mike Briggs, but it was all academic, with everything now centering on the Aberdeen-Taylor battle. The gap between the pair was now down to less than a car length, with Terry Moss and the second works Audi also throwing everything into a final effort to catch De Villiers and turn matters into an Audi whitewash. However, in the end, the Driver of the Day award, if there was one, would have gone to Anthony Taylor. It's great to see him back.
A huge win for Chris Aberdeen and the engine Audi squad, and another sparkling performance from Anthony Taylor. Terry Moss just failed to catch a relief Janelle De Villiers, but it was Audi's day.
I certainly set my car up with a little less camber, and it worked. At the end of the race, the Nissans had a lot of understeer, and my car was handling really nicely, so caught them at the end and won.
The traditional bubbly on the podium,